Good morning, Javier. Thank you for
Good
joining me.
afternoon for me,
Oh,
just a lunch.
that's
Yeah,
great. Coming from Rioja. Nice.
yes,
How's
yes.
the weather today in Rioja?
This week is actually quite sunny. We're having very mild temperatures for being February. So after is quite a snowy January, February is being quite mild.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's been 2 days ago since we have the restaurants open again after 5 weeks. So we are coming through an exciting weekend, I think.
Great. People are probably so thrilled to be out and about, and that's great. So, tell me a little bit about Bodegas Muriel and its history, and including how it got its name.
So, well, first of all, Muriel comes from joining together the initials of Murua, which is our last name, RI, which is from Rioja, and EL from Elciego, which is the village we are based in. Um, historically, it goes back to the 1920s when my grandfather started in the wine trade in Rioja, mainly by first of all by vinifying, because he came from the Basque Country, so he didn't inherit or have any vineyards. So he was buying grapes, making the wine, and selling it bulk into the bars and restaurants in the Basque region, maybe San Sebastian and Bilbao. And the business went developing like in that sense until the 1970s, when he decided to sell the company, which was Murua, our last name, the name of the company at that time. And he decided to sell because, first of all, the continuity to his children, so my father and his other brothers, it was the gap in age was quite big. So my grandfather when he sold, which was the 1970, he was 77, and my father at the time was 27. So the gap in age was quite big. And also in the 70s, wine industry in Spain didn't have the brand awareness that it has today. People were consuming wine as a commodity, and mainly the reason to choose one wine or the other was the person or the producer behind it. But it was very specifically to the name behind the wine or the person making it or selling it, not the brand. So for that reason, my grandfather sold his business and his business model at the time. And my father, he was trained as winemaker and started working as winemaker for other companies. And in the 80s, he started the business as it's continued to be today. Muriel, because obviously my grandfather had sold the brand name Murua, which is our last name. And Muriel, bit by bit, started to be successful in the local areas, expanded through the Basque regions again, then to the rest of Spain. And at the end of the 90s, we did a big bet in going into the export markets, basically because we were a bit late into building the brand in the Spanish market, in the domestic market, but in the export we thought there was a gap, and everyone was competing with the same weapons, basically, because there was no exceptionally well recognized brands in the export market. So at the end of the 90s, that became our main focus, and today we are exporting 85% of our wine. And it's not only Muriel anymore, it's we've been adding and creating more business. So it's Pazo Figueiro with a production in Rías Baixas with the Albariño. It's Viña Guía, which allows us to do very consistent, easy drinking wine from Rioja. It's Real Compañía, where we basically produce wines, varietal driven wines from all around Spain. And Conde de los Andes, which is a historic cellar. We don't know exactly the foundation date, because we know the cellars are from sometimes in the 14th or 13th century. We're not sure, but we do know is that they've been making wine in that place since 1705, when the Paternina family, we have proof that we have documents that it was when they decided to invest and expand the business. So 1705 is kind of our, is that time in the period where we have documents that the business was expanding. They were probably making wine there from a generation before or two, but we don't exactly have any documents or any proof that was like that. So in actually very little time, it's 35 years, starting only with the reputation that my grandfather built. We created one of the most successful wineries in Rioja at the moment.
Right.
I think it's for others to judge.
And when you were growing up, did you always think you would be part of the family business, or was there a point where you wanted to do other things?
We've never had the pressure, and actually my sisters are not working in the company. We've never had the pressure, but I have been kind of linked in some way, probably because of traveling or tasting wines with my father and visiting. I didn't visit many clients, but I did visit a lot of grape and wine suppliers with him. So I did kind of think that I would join at some time or other, I would join the business. There was a point in my life that I thought I wanted to be a pilot too. So, but yeah, I think the fact that I will be here, it's always been in my mind. Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about Rioja and its natural environment. So it's divided into 3 zones, and your wineries are in Alavesa, correct?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about what Alavesa is compared to the others. What distinguishes it?
Well, to talk about Alavesa, we need to talk about Rioja in general a little bit. So it's divided in 3 areas, which are different geographic location. The valley of Rioja, there's a river that runs through the middle of the valley, like most valleys, but it goes from northwest to southeast. The latitude orientation is not very big. So basically from west to east. Rioja Alavesa, it's situated in the north of the river. So most of the climate-wise, we have Rioja Baja, which brings all the Mediterranean influence. So therefore, Rioja, it's mainly Mediterranean climate. And then when we go towards the west, we have more Atlantic or continental influence. Continental will be dry and cold in the in the winters, and Atlantic will be wet and cold in winter, and cooler. Both climates are cooler than the Mediterranean in the summer, but still the temperatures are warm. The main difference in terms of climate from Rioja Baja to Rioja Alta in the summer will be the cooler nights. You know, nights are much cooler in the western areas, and then difference from Rioja Alavesa to the others are soils, which are mainly clay and a little bit of limestone with a bit of potassium content, which are not present in the other regions. That's why there's a little less acidity in the wines. And then because it's in the north, in the slopes of the Sierra de Cantabria, most of the vineyards are south facing, so with a lot of sun exposure. And then a very important distinction between Rioja Alavesa and the other two areas are the size of the vineyards. So the average size of the vineyard in Rioja Alavesa is 1 acre.
Small.
Yeah, so that's why the blending concept in Rioja, it's been very important through its history. Mm-hmm. Historically, we've never had much focus in single vineyards or wine coming from one specific plot or from one area. It's been a blending region because Rioja historically has been thinking about continuity and consistency of one wine. And in Rioja Alavesa, basically, you need the blending because the wines, you can have such a big diversity of wines with the atomization of the different plots and so many growers involved in the industry here.
Right. So, but in Alavesa, the plots are even smaller than throughout the rest of the region?
Yeah. In Rioja Baja, I don't have a figure to talk about, but it's easy to find plots that are 20 acres, 50 acres, 100 acres. In Rioja Alta, there's an area which is kind of similar to Rioja Alavesa with I don't know how you call it in English, in Spanish, minifundio, when the plots are and the crops belong to many people but are very small. There's an area which is similar, but it's not rare either to find plots that are 50 acres or 75 acres. It's different, yeah.
Okay. So that brings us to the traditional versus modern ways in Rioja. Can you explain the difference between the two and where your winery falls in place?
I had a comment from an architect that what is classic today was actually very modern when they built the buildings. So I think it's not a modern and traditional is not a concept that I like much, because wine trends in the last years move very quickly. So and I think I will say in Rioja, traditional was a quality commodity. It was a style of wine that was very drinkable, very consistent through vintages, a style of itself, which was easy drinking wine, soft, quite fruit driven, but depending on the category, it could be more oxidation in the kind of Gran Reservas. For me, the modernity of Rioja would be giving a space to the diversity that we have. So, and and that I think is the success of the wine industry today, because consumers including me, we are not expecting to drink or taste always the same wine or the same style of wine. We like the diversity. So I would think modern will be giving that space to taste new things, so identify vineyards, identifying villages, identifying areas, sub areas, and that within Rioja it's very easy because there's huge diversity. And for us, we're in the moment that we have that with so many wineries, vineyards, because we own now around 600 acres, but we work with 700 different growers with different plots. We're trying to make a wine for each moment, and depending on the brand, we do one thing or the other. Muriel is much more vinculated to the area, to the village, to Rioja Alavesa, to the to our vineyards and those people that we have known for 50 years. My father and 30, no, I'm not that old, and 20 years for me. So I would say for us, with Muriel, we're trying to link again a sense of roots, of areas, of very linked with where we've been born. And I would say it's a modern concept, but with all the traditions that we've been learning, because at the end, tradition is like what you get from your parents or from the past generations that you're doing today, but you also adapt. And then with a guía, for instance, we use that traditional, what we want to achieve is that really traditional concept of Rioja, creating the joven crianza de reserva, which is based on a different aging of the wines. But also for us, it's very important that there is not much change from vintage to vintage. So we're always, with a guía, we're kind of always blending, some wine from Rioja Alavesa with Rioja Baja, with Rioja Alta, depending on what nature gives us every year. And then the Esconde de los Andes, which is, I would say, it's quite traditional with very modern winemaking and viticultural techniques. So, the concept modern traditional can be very, very wide, but I think we're comfortable in any of the.
Right, and it sounds like you take the best or what you need from both concepts.
Yeah.
And what about sustainability? Tell me a little bit about what's going on in Rioja. Are there a lot of organic producers, biodynamic? Or what are you doing?
We are I don't think Rioja is one of the regions where we're still, that we are still getting very much involved into organics. We do very little of organic wine at this moment, so there's maybe, what I would say, 1% of the production that we do organic from Rioja.
Right.
From Rioja, we do a lot of organic from the rest of Spain, and for us, it's a huge growing category. And
what?
For us, it's a hugely growing category, organic wines from Spain.
Okay.
But in Rioja, it's not yet. But because the 85% of the land is owned by growers, and the average the average property of a grower is maybe 20 acres. So, you know, still the grower is not feeling very comfortable or secure that the harvest is going to be, you know, all that they need it to be. On the other hand, I said we now own 600 acres. 2 years ago, we started the process of transforming 48 acres into organic. Yeah. And from there, it's been 40 acres 2 years ago, 40 acres on 2020, and another 40 acres in 2021, this year. The idea of it, we started in Rioja Oriental, which is drier area and with much more Mediterranean influence. So it's kind of it's more secure. It's safer to do organics there because there are less diseases. Right. Then last year we tasted a big plot. We tested a big plot in Rioja Alavesa, but Rioja Alavesa was a disaster for organic last year because mildew affected, affected all around Spain. And this year we're taking the risk and going for another 40 hectares in Rioja Alavesa. So, but again, that is, we can do it because we have a diversity of markets. We control our markets, we control our production, and we started, in a small percentage, right, in comparison to our total property. So we're tasting, it will get there because it's a global demand, something that progressively will happen. But I think in Rioja, being so dependent in the growers, the growers need security that they're going to get their income every year, basically.
Huh. So you own vineyards then in all three of the subregions?
Yes, yeah.
But is it predominantly in Alavesa, your vineyards, or they're spread out equally?
They're not equal. We have around 400 acres a little less than 400 acres in Rioja Baja. It's one vineyard. Oh. We own like 150 in Rioja Alavesa, and the rest we have it in Rioja Alta.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So let's go through the wines that we've tasted, and you can talk about we'll talk about, because there's different wineries, starting with let me show this one.
Albariño.
You have to pronounce it because I don't pronounce it correctly.
So grape variety is Albariño.
Right, but the winery?
And the winery is called Pazo Cilleiro, which Cilleiro. Galician, they're kind of Celtics. They are quite complex. So, and Cilleiro gives name to the person in charge of the wine when the monks were making the wine in the monasteries. Oh. So Cilleiro comes from Thayer, cellar. So
gotcha. So tell us a little bit about the wine and the environment where it grows. It's I have to say, when I tasted the wine, it just literally brought me, in my mind anyways, it brought me to the beach. Yeah, and I was wishing I had a plate of oysters and some sand between my toes. It was like amazing. It almost like smelled of the ocean. It's a beautiful wine.
It's not surprising because Ria Spices, actually we don't own any vineyards there, but we work with more than 300 growers, and all the land there, I would say, is not further than 5 kilometers to the sea.
Nice.
So it's actually the best known seafood region in Spain. So there's, for your interest in the oysters.
Yeah.
And the wine, it's a very wet, very wet area, Rías Baixas. But Albarino, it's a very specific grape variety that grows there. Most of the summers can be dry in August and rainy in June, July. Climate change is changing everything, but still, it's an area where I think the biggest difference is the granite soils. Most of regions in Spain are clay or limestone, but in Galicia, which is the political region, there's a lot of granite composition. And if we go back to the wine, which is actually important, we feel a lot of freshness, but also a lot of weight. And for me, the most important character of Albarino is the saltiness. When you taste it, you actually always feel that saltiness that is sea. For me, it's the sea character that Albarino has, and no other white wine in Spain shares that concept. Yeah,
I love that. And that also makes it go great with so many different kinds of food, because it's like it's like a sprinkle of salt on whatever you're eating.
And actually, I think the first vintage we made of Albarino was 2014, and it's like a month ago. For the first time, I tasted the vertical of all the vintages that we made, and it's surprisingly good how Albarino ages. It gains body, it integrates the acidity, but still keeps the saltiness and the length in the mouth.
Nice. So now let's move on to this winery. How do you pronounce this one?
Eguía. This is even more difficult. Eguía.
Can you
Eguía comes from truth in Basque.
Truth. The word means truth in Basque,
in
the Basque dialect.
Yeah, and what we wanted to achieve with the Eguía brand is that consistency that we were talking before. So I think it's truth. It's linked with expectations. So in the case of the Tempranillo, it's a very, very fruit-driven wine, round, bold, easy drinking, but also even though it's blended with Rioja Alta and Rioja Baja, it's blended to achieve the consistency. But I feel the main characteristic of Viñaría is the softness and roundness of the Tempranillo in the palate. It's still very aromatic. It's obviously Tempranillo. It has that red fruit, aromatic character, also some, how do you call it, licorice, a little bit of licorice. But in the mouth, it's very soft. It's very soft and easy drinking.
Yeah, it was a nice blend of the fruit and more savory qualities too.
Yes.
It wasn't like overly fruity at all. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And now moving on to
Muriel. This is easier to pronounce.
Yeah, Muriel. Although I say Muriel and you say it
Muriel.
Okay. So we talked a lot. Let's talk about the wine, since we talked a lot about the winery already. This is the Reserva from 2016.
Okay. So Muriel Reserva 2016. 16 was wines in general were extremely elegant in Rioja Alavesa because of the weather during harvest. It was an extremely hot summer, and we thought grapes were not going to ripe, but just before harvest, just before what we expected, a very, very, very early harvest, we had some rain, which delayed harvest like 3 weeks or a month, but it really allowed the grapes to mature. And for me, Rioja Alavesa, well, I prefer it to 15 or any other vintage. It's very, very elegant wines. The grapes all come from the village of Elciego, so therefore it's very distinctive to any other wines that we make or any other reservas in the market. So our goal, we always want to be better than the rest, but obviously taste is very subjective. We want to make a style of our own, and the best way to make the style of our own is being very specific to the origins of the grapes. And when you smell the wine, it's still very young, a lot of fruit. There's a combination of red fruit and a little bit of black fruit, just a hint of it, which is, I think they come up because of the aging. With a longer aging, I think longer aging allows the darker fruit to come along more. We also have some vanilla and kind of a spicy notes from the barrel aging. The aging is made in American and French oak barrels, 50 and 50%, and around 30% is new. The new barrels, we do feel them in the mouth because the new French barrels, they're more obvious because the mouth, it's very pleasant mouth, quite fresh, but we have that sweet tannin that comes from the new oak. We don't want to go further than 30% of new barrels, because otherwise we feel it needs much more aging in the bottle in order not to get those tannins too dry.
Right.
And the most important of these wines, in general of most of the wines that we make, they are very, they have a lot of length in the mouth. The aftertaste is very long.
Yeah. I was impressed by I don't typically like a lot of, or any like oaky flavors in my wine, but this one, somehow it really worked. It just blended well with all the fruit flavors, and it wasn't overpowering, and it just added a nice note. And also I noticed with a lot of the Rioja wines, there's the tannins are sort of like almost like a chalky tannin. What does that come from? It's
Well,
like
it comes,
a chalky feeling it leaves in your mouth, but it's really pleasant.
Rioja, we make the wines and we release the wines because of the categories when they are ready to drink. So it's not the same releasing, quite a structural or full-bodied wine when it's just been bottled and releasing it to the market, than releasing the wine to the market when it's already spent 2 or 3 years in the bottle. So there's been time to round up that hard tannin
Yeah. Okay.
that you can get in concentrated wines. But the oak, we need to keep the tradition. Oak is barrel tradition in there.
So now let's talk about this Conde de los Andes.
Well, this is
This is a beautiful wine. This is the 2015, and this is your. When did you acquire this winery?
We got this winery in 2014, and first wine we made there, it was 2015 vintage, was the first harvest we made in that cellar. Mm-hmm. Because when we acquired the winery, the winery's function was basically aging the best reservas or the best wines from the previous owners. But they moved, actually the Paternina family moved wine production in 1926 from that cellar to another cellar that they had in Aro, that they own in Aro, 3 kilometers away. So 2015, it's the first harvest we made there, but it was the first harvest made in that cellar since 1926.
Wow.
They had been making wine previous to 1926 for almost 250 years, but then they stopped. And when we acquired the winery, we decided to have very specific vineyards, vinification, barrel maturation there. So we actually made a Cave Conde de los Andes a unique identity.
What does that mean, Conde de los Andes?
So Conde, it's a noble title. It's count. And Andes, it's the Andes, the mountains. The reason for the name, there was a time in Rioja or in Spain that the wines were linked to a noble title. And Conde de los Andes, he was the viceroy of Peru when Spain, he was actually the last viceroy of Peru when Spain lost the colonies. So when he came back in when he came back in, I think it was 1805, to Spain, the king gave him the title of Conde de los Andes. So winery-wise, it was created, they were making wine under Paternina brand, which was the name of the family sometime in the 17th century. But the brand Conde de los Andes was created to name their best cuvées, and that was, I think it was in the 1960s when that brand was created. So there's a lot of history there.
Yeah. And how come on this wine it doesn't say Gran Reserva, it's
because we want to break the rules. No, that's the area where we're being traditional in the style of wine we want to release. We want to release a wine that is already been aged for a long period before it's released, but we don't want to be attached to any rules. So basically what's happening with that wine, that we are aging to be called Reserva or Gran Reserva, the wine has to be aged in 225 liter barrels, and we're using only new oak or second use oak in Conde de los Andes, but we're aging in 225 liter barrels. We're aging in 500 liter barrels. We are combining it with aging in concrete eggs.
Oh, interesting.
And we are combining it with aging in bigger wooden vats, like the ones in Italy, 5,000 liters, 6,000 liters.
Right.
So when we combine all the different methods of aging, we're not allowed to call it Reserva or Crianza or Gran Reserva anymore. Right. And towards the future, we're seeing the development of the wines, and we are moving to basically exclusively concrete eggs and 500 liter barrels. So we will keep them longer in barrel and in the concrete eggs, but they will be bigger formats.
Right. And is your goal to decrease sort of that oak presence?
What? It's not actually a goal, because I think each year needs a different. It needs different vinification and different aging periods, or different aging different aging structure, or in a way we see that years are needed more new oak, some years are needed more second oak, or wooden vat or concrete egg. There is a trend, general trend of using, having wines with less oak influence, but all these trends come and go. It's actually what we're seeing now in trend is almost the opposite of what we were expecting for quality 10 years ago. So, basically, we want to make the wine we like the best wine possible, to our palates every year. It's not giving more oak or less. Really depends on the year, but it's not a goal that I want to use less, or I would use. My feeling is that with Conde de los Andes, using longer aging in bigger format, it gives a better result for the style of wine that we want to make than using a smaller barrels with new oak and shorter aging.
Right.
But yeah.
And tell us about the cellars, the historic cellars there. They're quite amazing, I hear.
Yeah, it's as I say, we don't know exactly the name, the year that they were built. We think it was sometime around the 14th century. It's a mile long of underground cellars, but it's underground cellars that through its history they've been split and gone back together because of heritage or expanding or selling property and so on. So it's not actually that it's a tunnel which is 1 mile long. It's very, very small. Well, not very small, but there are, I would say there can be 16 different caves, all connected together that make a mile long, and that's full of bottles of wine dating back to 1892.
Wow.
So it's actually an underground treasure.
Sounds like it. And wine tourism has become very popular throughout Rioja. What do you offer visitors?
We keep it simple because it's such a distinctive site that we keep it very simple. It's a guided tour of the cellars, including the vinification area with a tasting in one of them. Very, very small size groups. Now, obviously, with COVID, we keep it down to a maximum of 6, but on a normal basis, it's a maximum of 12.
Uh-huh.
So it's very, it's a very familiar, personal and very personal tour through the wineries, which will take around an hour and a half by going through the different caves and explaining part of the history. And then at the end of the visit, we share some wines and some time to spend in the winery, and people can stay there as long as they want, basically.
Sounds great. Next time I'm in Rioja, I know where I'll be spending some time.
You have to come and visit. Yeah, and I know we're all desperate to move around.
Yes. Okay. See you in Rioja then. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been great. I really learned a lot.
Today, Lisa, it's been a year. Today makes it a year since I took my last flight.
Wow.
Last year today, I was coming back from Tasmania.
Oh my. Ah, a whole year. I know. I haven't obviously flown in about a year either.
Hmm.
Well, let's just hope that sooner than another year we'll all be visiting each other again.
I hope so. I hope so.
Okay. All right. Take care and see you soon,
Thank
I
you.
hope. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.